I don't think you want to be giving away favors here.
But you know, Magnus has done that before. When his opponent has blundered with a mouse slip and lost on the spot, he sort of returned the favor in the very next game by doing exactly the same, just to level the score and saying reset, let's go.
Let me suggest something subtly different. Magnus does that because he is so certain that he is going to win over the board. He is so certain that under normal circumstances, without the mouse slips, without the mistakes, without the flagging, he would win anyway, that he gives it back not out of mercy, out of confidence.
It's possible. It's possible. Who knows when it comes to Magnus Carlsen? Very mood dependent. In the meantime, we see the Carokann defense. And here, black setting up with the Fianchetto, white doing the same. Alireza played this queen move against Nodibek Abdusattorov. He used it just yesterday. Just the day before, even in the quarterfinals. And Magnus pausing. That shows a lack of homework, I'm going to say. Magnus should have been studying Alireza's games. The pause here, surprising.
The first think there by Magnus after the queen move. And I think what he wants to do now is think about expanding, not in the center, because if you push the D pawn, you're opening up Alireza's sniper on G7. But he wanted to go B4 next, which now has been stopped by Alireza with that last move A5, so not allowing. And I was thinking this is not going to happen, but Magnus says game on, D4 on the board. This is going to be maximum tension, a 4-pawn stare-off.
If you're not going to let me play B4, then fine, let's do this anyway. I wonder how this is going to end up for the players.
Yeah, a lot of choice now for Alireza. He can resolve the tension immediately. He can capture one of white's central pawns, or he can wait, maybe develop the knight that hasn't yet entered the action. Either way, Alireza now has been surprised. Magnus with the jacket off, meaning business. Maybe he had studied this before. Maybe just that pause was to recollect things, to lull Firouzja into that false sense of security. We do see a trade. Magnus takes back with his knight, not giving himself the big pawn center, maybe reluctant to get isolated pawns there. But now it looks like the whole center will liquidate. It's going to be symmetry a bit later on. And it's going to be about who can profit from that scenario.
And so many knight jumps once that pawn trade at the center of the board happens, because pawn takes pawn will definitely be met by the knight recapturing. You know, Alireza isn't going to give a weakness at the center of the board. We can expect then Magnus's knight to jump at the center. Or will he just do Magnus things? One move that Magnus loves to play is pushing the h-pawn forward. Whether he's castled the king or not, h4 always on the cards. Modern chess, when in doubt, play h4.
Yeah, what do you foresee? Is it going to happen? Is Magnus going to resolve the central tension or play on the wings?
Big question. Does he want to keep the tension right now or add to it?
I don't mind if it's Magnus or anybody else. I just want to see h4 on the board. So I'm very, very keen.
I'll say one thing though, John. If h4 happens, I think Alireza stops the advance. You really don't want that pawn to go all alpha 0. In this case, alpha Magnus on you with h5 coming in and then a potential h6.
Sure, yeah, exactly. I think the logical response to h4 is h5, admittedly. And then from that point onwards, it's a little bit harder to get super excited about it because the follow-up to build that kingside attack, especially with the bishops pointing at the queen side, might be a little bit more difficult. But h4 certainly worth a try.
Yep, so no wing play against the Falcon yet. Instead, it's some knight action as we see Magnus the first to blink. He trades off a bishop for knight. A very controversial decision, I'm going to say, because he's parted with his beautiful light squared bishop. The white king, a bit airy on those light squares, but Magnus laughing, smiling again, looking very, very happy with his position. He gained a tempo against the black queen, which is forced home, but now the white knight on c4 is hit and needs to decide. Magnus seems in very good spirits. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for Firouzja.
Usually that's a bad thing. You know, Magnus is the strongest player on the planet any day, but when he comes in a good mood, he's enjoying his chess. He knows he's up in the match already, feeling the floor in his position. Now, he's taking a decision. Does he go aggressive with his knight? Knight d6? Or is he going to have a more cautious approach? Just come back to the center of the board. Knight to e3 was what I was going to suggest. And then I just realized that knight e3 is probably the one square you don't want to move it to. That bishop on f4 would have been trapped, but look at that.
Oh, hello.
Magnus Carlsen inviting a lot of complications. Bishop d6.
Yep, that's a double attack. It is a fork on the black rook and the black knight. Magnus now looking up to the skies. He's pretty much forced Firouzja here to take his knight. The white bishop's going to take the black knight. Taking the rook would have led to a material deficit for Magnus, 2 pieces against a rook. So now it's level material, but the black rook can save itself. Don't know why Firouzja's pausing here. Rook to e8 is the most logical move in the position, and he's playing against the bishop pair, Magnus.
And that's the surprising part, right? He's also helped Firouzja get rid of that problem in the center, the pawn that was there, and now after all these trades, it's going to be Firouzja getting his bishop to h3 with even potential checkmating ideas, the kiss of death on g2 if the queen and the bishop can line up against that white king. This is going to be Magnus on the defense for a long time.
The weaknesses on the light squares, you're right. The fact that that king feels just a little bit airy means that in the long run, this doesn't feel comfortable. It's not necessarily hugely advantageous or anything like that, but certainly a situation where you might have to defend for a little while before you can spot your opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see how they choose to respond to this.
And Falcons are here is what we saw on the screen. You know, Hikaru Nakamura already getting the third place for Falcons. Alireza Firouzja fighting for the crown right now. They're definitely here. They've arrived.
Yeah, I saw some of Magnus's liquid teammates as well in the arena. It feels like everyone is out in full support today for this grand final. This is, again, just the beginning, just set one, but still plenty of action ahead. The white queen comes out. I was going to at least suggest that Magnus tries to get the queens off the board as soon as possible to avoid any checkmating ideas. Magnus doesn't look happy in the meantime, reacting somewhat there. Position still in the balance, despite the fact black does have those hugely potentialed bishops.
You know, I think it comes down to that sequence of moves that just happened with the trades of the knight at the center of the board. Magnus kind of with a smile putting the bishop forward. But at the end of it all, when the dust is settled, Magnus realizes that this is not what he was aiming for. You know, as you evaluate this position, and look at that, we were talking about h4, it's Alireza on the attack. Magnus has to stop it. He does, but it further creates those light square weaknesses. Now the bishop can plant itself on g4.
There are some developmental questions to ask as well, because you want to really get the light squared bishop off its starting square for black at some point. You can't move the b pawn, you can't play b6 because the queen would take the rook on a8. Please, not for the second time in this match. But you move that, and then where are you going? Do we get the queen out first? Oh, unfortunately, the rook on e8 would then get taken. You want to move the bishop out instead to e6 or f5? Well, guess what? The knight's there to gobble it up. It's actually not super clear how Firouzja completes development and continues on this game, even though his position looks comfortable right now.
Yeah, he's going to have to calculate. He's going to have to be very concrete about his mode of development here, Alireza Firouzja. One idea would be to bring the bishop out, as Tanya mentioned, and if the white queen captures a pawn, then on the b7 square, the black rook will slide across with some action of its own on the b file. It's a long sequence going through his mind, Alireza Firouzja. He's trying to prove here that the bishop pair is the superior piece configuration, but it's not going to be easy at all. And let's just show that on the board for everyone at home. Bishop to g4 is the move he wanted to play. He actually plays his rook out, which is very surprising, but bishop to g4 would have allowed the queen to capture a pawn and the rook to slide across. And next move, when the queen retreats, rook takes pawn on b2, after maybe a rook trade, and this would have led to some big complications. But maybe we go back to the game, because this was something he wanted to avoid. The bishop would have had to retreat. Instead, Magnus desperately trying to offer a trade of queens. So we saw two different types of positions there. Firouzja choosing not to set the board alight. He's going more positional. Maybe now forced to trade if he's not going to drop the c4 pawn.
And I don't think it matters if Alireza has a clear sequence of moves that gives him advantage. He just needs to keep this imbalance of the bishop pair. He needs to make sure that as many pieces as can remain on the board. And this is the kind of position where he needs to bring Magnus to that bullet territory. That's when his odds would increase. While saying that, he first gets the queens off, now puts the bishop on g4, hits the knight, aiming with that rook lift to activate it further. But even in this endgame, I think that's his plan. Just bring Magnus down on the clock. He's got something to play for here.
He was trying endlessly to avoid playing the Magnus-style game, moving the queen away in the last game when the queen trade was offered. This time around, he's saying, look, relatively equal on the clock. Let's actually get the queens off the board and see what we can do.
Ooh, and he brings his rook up. He's actually aiming to shuffle that rook across to the b5 square and go for white's queenside pawns once the bishop saves itself. Very, very sneaky from Alireza. That is a bit of a genius move, I'm going to say, because he's actually allowing what looks like a desirable bishop trade for Magnus Carlsen. The bishop could have gone to d4, and the black rook sliding across would now have been super effective. Let's say a bishop trade happens, and you cannot defend your b-pawn since the black bishop drops back and hits the white rook on b1. The pawn on b2 would have dropped next move. So Magnus Carlsen instead forced onto the defensive. The white bishop has been sidelined. Tanya, this just looks grim for white, although maybe with the rook trade he's going to hold it now.
You know, the bar says this position's level, and I think the rook trade, it will happen because you really want to put your rook on f5. You're not only putting it on this really weird square, but also taking away the escape route of your own bishop. But after rook takes rook, the big question is how much does Alireza believe in his chances, and does he play on this position? Very close to a Magnus hold this one. And I think that would be a relief for Magnus.
One word, fortress. He might have no way to break through Alireza Firouzja, just like he made that fortress for Magnus last game.
It might be the case where Magnus would start believing in fortresses himself. The rooks come off, bishop to b1. That's the idea that I would be concerned about. That a2 pawn, how are you defending it?
Not sure, actually, at the moment. And it takes 2 tempi as well to move that pawn too. So I wonder what's going to happen here and whether that is simply the line. Is there maybe a counter punch somewhere that that white can do? Or is this one of those situations where even if we have a pawn in balance and we go a pawn up, it's not enough to convert?
I'm pretty sure Magnus has missed this, by the way. I don't think he's seen this idea. We haven't seen a reaction on the camera from him yet. I think he's trying to keep a poker face, but if that move lands, Magnus is going to have to scramble to try and hold equality. Eval bar still says 0.0, but not obvious how white holds that one.
That would be Alireza returning the favor from game 1. It was the b8 square the knight landed on in game over. But for some reason, Alireza decides to keep the balance, doesn't put his bishop on b1, but it's a threat that you need to watch out for. Magnus's knight gets active, stopped that check on e7. Alireza brings his king forward. David, this is not as simple as it looks for white.
This is horrible for white. It's a 2-result game for everyone at home who might be wondering what that means. It means black should be out of danger. It's going to be either a win for black if Magnus is unable to defend, or a draw if he can build a fortress. Very minimal chances that white wins this one.
Now, let's see to what extent the clock is going to play a role in this game as well. Magnus Carlsen, 4 minutes 40, playing just under 3 minutes for Alireza Firouzja. You know what? He had 4 versus 1 in the previous game, so frankly, this is already a little bit better, but he needs to not go in the tank now.
And Alireza can start dominating that knight that has jumped too far away with no squares to return. And look at that bishop on e4, the black king heading towards the center of the board, combining all these ideas. The only thing, he needs to move fast, Alireza does, for a real shot at winning and equalizing this match.
2.5 minutes, he's got to speed up. The heart rate has been rising for Alireza. He needs to, I was going to say, bring the king across, dominate that knight. He was scared of the white pawn stepping forward to the a4 square, given a question mark, but now Magnus has a small window of opportunity. He needs to get his knight out of the black camp as quickly as he can. That move hits the black bishop in the process. Magnus should be saving himself and escaping, but he has to evacuate that piece. There we go. First step. Now he'll move the white bishop out the way, and the white knight returns to safety.
That was a big moment, you know, to have tried to trap that knight, those sequence of moves. Again, it comes down to clock because Alireza is also trying to play fast. And that is when these inaccuracies happen. He does retreat with the bishop and it's still level, but white's the one who's suffering in this position.
We need Firouzja to hit that god mode. We need him to start calculating with immense speed and trusting his instincts maybe a little bit more and absolutely going for it so that he doesn't end up in a situation where he risks making a critical mistake with under a minute left on the clock. We need to see that from him now so that that isn't a possibility later.
You know what he's done with this bishop maneuver is to get that critical move going. And I think at some point, g5 is the break that Alireza is hoping for. That pawn on the right side of the board moves forward, and then we might see Magnus stuck with the weakness of the g3 pawn. But he has to time it well, and time is a luxury that Alireza does not have.
Needs to go for it. Pawn to g5. He needs to actually accelerate the play. He's being very, very patient, Firouzja, and normally I never fault that. It's a great skill in chess, but you can't be patient with 2 minutes on your clock. You need a clear path forward, and there we go. Pawn to g5. Has he timed it correctly? He's going for it, but he's allowed Magnus to drop back with a knight, attacking a bunch of things, attacking black's dark square bishop and those pawns that have advanced. Firouzja shaking his head. He might have just let Magnus off the hook.
And it was all about making this move at the right time. And he didn't. Knight e4, Firouzja is about to lose his bishop advantage. To keep it, he has to now trade on f4, fall back with his own bishop, just to make sure that the game keeps going. But that leaves him with a big weakness on h5. The white knight can start targeting that pawn.
Magnus locks up the kingside. The knight move is coming, knight to g3. Firouzja has to be careful here. He needs to pull the break here and now, 1.5 minutes. He's no longer better.
But how do you even do that? If you try to get rid of that knight, it's heading to g3 to pick up that h5 pawn. Knight g3. And I think what he wants is bishop to d7 to win that f5 pawn in return. This is what Firouzja has set up. Magnus Carlsen, is he sensing his opportunity right now?
This is Firouzja's plan. Magnus sees it and is looking for a way forward. Ultimately, the eval bar says 0.0. It looks like both sides have a way towards a draw, but again, how hard is Magnus going to press on the clock? He moves his bishop out the way. White knight, okay, could have gone back there. Instead, the king defends the pawn. Black's dark square bishop can't really move, can't really get around.
And that's what Magnus did with his bishop move, right? He took away all the squares that Alireza's dark square bishop had to give a check to that white king. Can't go to d8, can't go to d6. Alireza comes back with his own bishop. Magnus can repeat. Magnus can bring his king back right now if he wants to stop the game.
He's got that option. Will he choose to exercise it? 2 minutes 40, plays a minute 04. I think he'll probably play on a little bit, but is there a... I'm looking for a second avenue of attack. It really does look like everything is hinging on whether an attack against the h5 pawn can be repelled.
And he just cannot let the black dark squared bishop in, Magnus Carlsen. He's trying to make sure that he doesn't allow any counterplay. He retreats his king. This is the second time we've seen that position. Oh, Alireza goes for the win this time. He could have forced a draw instantly by bringing his bishop back. He actually goes around. He's trying to check the white king. That is potentially very dangerous. The black bishop not only will check the white king, but it's going to go behind and start snacking on the base of white's queenside pawn chain. Magnus here, he's the one who has to pull the brakes this time. This is a very scary threat he's facing.
That is huge. If Magnus allows that, the whole house collapses on the left side of the board. He's going for a counterattack of his own, attacking h5. This has suddenly become a 3-result endgame.
Wow, he's let the black bishop in. This is really brave. Is it going to be foolhardy for Magnus Carlsen? The bishop gets in. Look at the eval bar. It's dropping. It's in black's favor. Alireza's got in. Magnus is trying to shut the door with his own bishop. But is it going to be enough?
That is the big question. He's defended one pawn. Can he defend the other pawn? Magnus Carlsen retreats the knight to do just that. Alireza has to activate the other bishop, gives a check to Magnus's king, falls back, 43 seconds on the clock. A minute deficit for Alireza, but Alireza is the one who's playing for a win.
Oh, I don't know. That black dark square bishop on b2 is trapped. He holds the white king away from moving towards it for now, but Alireza, he's playing without a piece. That black dark square bishop on b2 could potentially be doomed. Magnus can just sit now. Black has no winning plan. Magnus has built a fortress. 28 seconds for Firouzja. Will we see a repeat of what just happened in game 2? The players starting to move their pieces back and forth.
Or will this time Magnus Carlsen try to flag Alireza with the bishop trapped? And there Magnus, he's repeating again. He doesn't want to play on.
Eval bar says Magnus actually has an advantage, but he doesn't realize it. And we see a draw by repetition for the second time in this first set.